Good morning, guys. It is Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. This Bathrobe business. I got the coffee and I got the news. So I've got a number of interesting stories to talk to you guys about today. Let's jump right into it. The first one's going to be about Boeing. So Boeing is not doing good. Honestly, it's the Stellantis of airlines. How its stock isn't below $100 at this point is still shocking to me. I say that because I checked the ticker symbol. They're still at 149. So they're hanging on there, but I don't understand how. So Boeing is set to cut 17,000 jobs as losses deepen, and they still have a continued factory strike. This is 10% of its workforce. In addition, they're failing to deliver on a 77X wide-body version, which already had standing orders with Lufthansa, and I think that's how you say it. I never know how to pronounce that word, Lufthansa. Anyway, and the Emirates until 2026, and that's actually 6 years behind schedule. This article kind of highlights everything that's going on with Boeing. It's everything we pretty much know. They're not managing anything properly, and the company seems like it's in free fall collapse. If it wasn't for government contracts, I don't think this company would have existed anymore. But it does not look like it's getting any better. All right, next story. Chips. So TSMC reported third quarter profits jumping 40% on strong AI demands. Now remember, companies like NVIDIA don't make their own chips. They rely on TSMC to do all of that out of Korea. And so usually a strong manufacturing and sales in TSMC will equate to stronger sales at all the other companies. However, NVIDIA set some pretty lofty goals. I don't know if this is going to mean that NVIDIA is going to have a good quarter, simply because the rate of growth that they set at their last conference call for this upcoming quarter was incredibly ambitious, and a lot of people had doubts. I haven't dived into the numbers, but this is probably where you could make a good move, depending on if you dive into these numbers deep enough of what happens with NVIDIA. I think they report their earnings in November. So depending on, I would jump heavily into these numbers and try to determine where the growth was, try to determine where shipments occurred, and see if that will reflect on NVIDIA. I haven't done that work. I haven't done that analysis, but you can potentially either buy or short NVIDIA based, I think, off of this report, just because there's such a strong relation between NVIDIA and TSMC. Next story. I guess we'll stay on the we'll divert from we'll stay on the tech route for real quick. I just wanted to talk about this story. It's from Whole Foods. So Amazon is using robotics at Whole Foods, is going to start using robotics at Whole Foods. And it sounds like a fancy article, but really what's happening is they're going to be installing these racks. I'm going to play this video for 2 seconds. Miniature warehouse on the back of the building that is moving product around, mostly for in-store pickup. It may also aid in delivery as well, as stuff is aggregated and delivered to a centralized location. But it's going to be moving out into multiple Whole Foods across the country, as they're investing heavily in robotics. So staying on that kind of tech route. I think it's an interesting idea. I think it makes a lot of sense for doing this, because it won't. Currently, what they're using is pickers, right? We actually used to do this back in the day when I worked at Sears. We had online orders, and every store actually served as a fulfillment center. And so we would have guys that run around the floor, gathering products, aggregating them for online orders and getting them shipped out. It's this, and grocery stores have been doing the same thing. This just makes the process a little more streamlined and a little more efficient, because they have a miniature warehouse in the back that's going to be doing this for them. One of the downsides, I think it's a lot of times people read this article and they'll say, oh no, the machines are taking over, it's the end of the world. As someone who works with complicated machinery, we work with a lot of CAD/CAM and 3D printing systems. These things are down just as often as they're up. You really just need an on-site technician, or I should say maybe in this scenario, like a roaming technician that's going to be going from location to location, troubleshooting problems when they occur, because problems do occur. Machinery breaks down, there's software glitches, there's computer updates that come through and mess up your network. So there's multiple factors that come in. So anytime you add one of these robotic systems, always remember on the back end, there's additional cost, labor for support and troubleshooting. That's something that's never talked about. They always talk about jobs getting streamlined away, but in reality, you're just displacing the job. let's stay on the robotics thing because I think this is an interesting story. So Elon Musk. I'm not even a hater, but it's like, how can you not? Musk's Optimus robot stole the show at Tesla's Robo Taxi unveil, but the AI was all smoke and mirrors. So apparently, the robots were not autonomous. They were being operated entirely by pilots. So there was somebody on a remote control moving these robots around. That doesn't surprise me at all. That's a lot of smoke and mirrors that Elon Musk likes to do. So yeah, these robots were walking around talking to people, but none of it was true. They were just walking around being piloted by someone in the back. This isn't also actually different than a lot of what these AI companies have done. There's been multiple exposures that a lot of companies, including OpenAI and a bunch of big AI developers, have lied about their shows, where they're saying that these responses are coming from an individual, but in reality, they're coming from the AI, but they're actually coming from an individual somewhere else off-site. Even famously, the Amazon store that was supposed to be using AI to see what people are buying and then bill them as they leave was actually relying on people in India to be monitoring that video and manually adding those to the cart. So this does show you the limitations of AI and what it's capable of currently. Even when companies invest billions into it, the results are spotty at best. I think the problem is we keep saying AI instead of LLMs because LLMs work really great. But when you try to apply that to anything beyond what you see on the screen, it just starts to break down. Next story I want to cover is bank earnings. So bank earnings are topping expectations. So both Goldman Sachs and Bank of America beat on profits and revenue as stock trading and investment banking boosted results. So the major part of the story is the fact that both Bank of America and Goldman had record-breaking revenue. So for example, well, not record-breaking, fantastic revenue. It beat expectations. Goldman had revenue of 12.7 billion versus the 11.8 billion estimate, et cetera, et cetera. It talks about earnings of $8.40 a share versus $6.89. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this, what I found most interesting between this article and the Bank of America, is they both underscored the fact that it was equities and stock trading, which were the overperformers in the category above all else. Found that very interesting. I mean, obviously, for a company like Bank of America, that's their bread and butter. But even, companies like Goldman, that's their bread and butter. But even Bank of America was making massive revenues just from trading and interest on their trading accounts, dividends, et cetera, like that. I was not expecting that. I would have thought a lot, kind of like JP Morgan Chase, most of their revenue was going to be coming from interest rates on assets held by the bank. But no, apparently trading is where these companies are making a lot of their money. So something to think about. Last story I'm going to talk about. This is an interesting story, and there's a video that actually explains it better. So if you have time, as usual, all my links are in the description below. So this is a mortgage where you can get as low as about 3% on lending, opposed to what the standard is about 6%. So this is an interesting story, but I think it almost buries the lead. So what this is, it's a mortgage assumption. A lot of times people would call this maybe a seller finance, but this isn't a seller finance. So what happens is, let's say you hold a mortgage and your current rate is at 3% and you're going to sell. Some loans have a stipulation where the mortgage is transferable. So if I have a mortgage and I have a 3% interest rate and you come along and you say, hey, can I assume your mortgage? I say, yes, I sign over the mortgage to you. You take over at whatever that interest rate is. The reason the article underpins 3% was because for the longest time, that was a lot of mortgages. So you assume that mortgage and continue payment. Now, this type of mortgage apparently was incredibly popular in the 1970s. But in 80s, they fell out of favor. Well, the reason they fell out of favor was because Congress passed the Garn-St. Germain Act of 1982, which essentially made banks force the seller to pay off the full amount before the mortgage transfer happened. Home ownership transfer happened. So essentially, I think I've discovered the only way you can fix housing, and that is to repeal the Gantt and St. Germain Act. This to me seems like a no-brainer. This is where I put on my libertarian hat, which I have a strong libertarian streak. Don't let the flag fool you. of saying, well, okay, we have a crisis of unaffordability in this country, and this one act is getting in the way of it. Why are we not at least suspending it? Well, I'll tell you why, because it benefits the banking system. And they will never allow it. This is where the libertarians are completely right, that most of these acts are written by corporations for major corporations. This act alone would open up the floodgates and make housing more affordable for millions of Americans. Because currently, the only options for these transferable rate mortgages are select FHA, VA, and USDA loans. That's a very small subset. In the entire sale of the United States, I believe it underpinned that in the last year, only about 4,000 loans like this. Oh, yep. Only about 4,000 FHA backed mortgage assumptions were completed in 2023. That's it. You're talking about across the entire United States, only 4,000 FHA mortgages were able to do this. So it's a great product if you can find it, but there also doesn't seem to be any mechanism for finding these. Most even sellers don't know that their mortgage is transferable. So the fact that you might get this mortgage is unlikely. But if this act was repealed, the Garn Saint Germain Act, then you would have that ability with virtually any mortgage out there. So it's what I try to always talk about on this channel, is that oftentimes why I talk about interest rates so heavily is because those interest rate cuts are not done for you. They're done for big corporations, because despite the fact that interest rates were cut last month, don't forget the cost of a 30-year mortgage actually went up. It did not go down, because a 30-year mortgage isn't just set off of the prime rate, it's set off of bond rates as well. And the bond rates went up. Now, who benefits? Actually, I forgot to mention this point. In this article, Goldman Sachs, literally the article underpins the fact that the firm's asset and wealth management division, hold on. Now that the Fed is easing rates, it positions Goldman to benefit as a corporation that have waited on the sidelines to acquire competitors, raise funds, and begin taking actions. Exactly. These rate cuts are not for you. They're for the government, and they are for major corporations. You do not benefit. They do. Just like this act that we talked about here. So just keep that in mind when you're going to the polls or anytime you make a vote. It doesn't really matter. Both of them are against you. But just think about the fact that they could fix this problem easily like that if they wanted to. That's pretty much it. Got a little political there at the end, but I hope you guys have a productive day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.